Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this museum sits on the ancestral lands of Wendat, Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and Anishinaabeg nations, including the Misagas of the Credit First Nation, who are the original stewards of this land from the time immemorial to today. This land has been a meeting place of diverse peoples for generations, and I am grateful to be here as the immigrants of Canada tonight continue that long tradition. Today's program is especially important that marks I'd like to introduce the introduction of ROM's new curator of Global Africa, who I spent a year now to recruit her to the ROM. We are very excited to have Tandazani Dhlakama. I don't use her last name that often, so pardon me. Tandazani Dhlakama in Toronto. Tandazani is a Zimbabwe-born curator who has worked in Zimbabwe and South Africa over the past 15 years, with a focus on art and artists from Africa and African diaspora. Tandazani joins ROM. Before she joins ROM, she worked for many years from the ZETS Museum of Contemporary Art Africa in Cape Town, South Africa. As I learned, that is one of the largest museums for African art in the world. A curator with vast experience, a singular vision, and a truly international outlook, Tandazani joins ROM at the moment when the institution is looking to deepen its engagement with African art and culture, so that the museum, ROM, is even more representative of and welcoming to the many communities with African connections in Toronto and beyond. As the ROM curator of Global Africa, Tandazani will lead a collaborative approach to stewarding and reinterpreting Canada's largest collections of African art and culture at ROM and beyond. This including developing a new visions for temporary and permanent display and supporting engagement with diverse African and diaspora community in the Great Toronto area, as well as the broader communities building on the ROM's ongoing reimagining of the scope and the missions of the museum's collection, the stories they tell, and the voice that are represented. We couldn't be much happier to have her here with us to moving this forward. This evening's program will including an illustrative talk by a contemporary artist, Masimba Hwati, followed by on-stage conversations and audience questions to be hosted by Tandazani Dhlakama. Please join me to welcome Tandazani to the stage to introduce our guest. Now you can hear from her directly.
Thank you so much, Chen. Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be able to host the first public program of my tenure here tonight as Curator for Global Africa. And I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce Masimba Hwati. Part of my mission in my new role is to amplify diverse African and Afro-diasporic narratives, to celebrate and to introduce leading thought leaders and artists from Africa to North American audiences, to highlight an art historical continuum connecting the heritage objects from the Global Africa collection to contemporary practices, and also to ensure that diverse African and African diasporic communities in Canada and beyond can see themselves represented here at the ROM. In light of this, I could think of no better artist to invite to be part of my Global Africa lecture than Masimba Hwati, as I believe his practice embodies this mission and so much more. Masimba is a multidisciplinary artist whose work explores everyday forms of resistance and negotiation through sculpture, sound, performance, and indigenous philosophies. He has won several awards, including the Catherine Pitchler Prize in 2023, 2 National Merit Awards, NAMA, in 2006 and 2005, and the Cape Town Art Fair's Tomorrow's Today section in South Africa, 2015. In 2015, he also represented his nation, Zimbabwe, at the 56th Venice Biennial of Art. His work is in several important collections around the world. There are too many to list here today, but I am happy to say that the ROM is now among the list of collections that house his works. Masimba holds a PhD in art practice from the Akademie der Bildenden Kunst, Vienna, and an MFA from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. I would like to invite Masimba up on stage. After his presentation, I will join him for a conversation about his practice. Please join me in welcoming Masimba Hwati.
Good evening. I've got a couple of people to thank before we begin. So I would like to thank Molly Minnick, Tracy Foster, Cindy Crawford, Adam Moffat, Erin Kay, and their respective teams. These people made it possible for this event to happen. There are many more of you that I would have thanked here, but yeah, please know that we are aware of your labor of love. Before we begin, I would like to teach you an approbation or a greeting from my people. It's a Chizimbabwe greeting. Would you guys like that? Yeah. Okay. So it's, think of it as tuning the atmosphere. It's a sonic practice. So usually how it works is you have men and women doing different things. But I want to assure you that it is not about gender, it is about different frequencies working together. So instead, maybe tonight, instead of having men and women, let us divide this hall into 2. Lady in blue, hi. So you will be our center tonight. So to your left, which is my right, is one part. To your okay, this side is one part, and this side is another part, okay? Because I also happen to be with you in the audience. So I'm a little confused because I'm with you. Okay, so these guys, you put your hands like this, cup your hands like this. This side, cup your hands like this. So this is called gusi. It's used to show respect when you're entering into a space, or when you're exiting a space, or when you're entering a sacred space. It's also an acknowledgement of the other person, and also those who are not here who made it possible for you to be here. It's also an acknowledgement of the earth and everything else. So pano anogona mururi nemuridzo here. Brilliant. Thank you very much. In Zimbabwe, the black market operates as an informal, yet deeply embedded system of foreign currency exchange, thriving on the streets of nearly every city. Since January 2009, the government legally authorized the US dollar as tender, making it the dominant and most desirable currency in Zimbabwe. So think of the black market as an itinerant, quasi-democratic bureau de change for the. It is a multi-sensory arena of survival. I composed a radio piece during my residency at the radio art program in Weimar to explore the poetic ties between Zimbabwe's black market and guerrilla radio. Field recordings from Harare's black market were layered with archival echoes from ZANU-PF and ZAPU guerrilla radio broadcasts from 1964 to 1979. Can you feel that vibration? These produced a sonic assemblage that listens back and reaches forward. At its epicenter is the attempt to capture the tension and complexity and beauty of struggle. I reflect on two personal stories. One told by my father, who was almost captured and killed by enemy soldiers during the war. Another from my mother, whose father was a key member of ZAPU under Joshua Nkomo. Around 1965, she witnessed ZAPU leaders secretly arriving at her father's house in Bari to listen to a forbidden wartime broadcast at night.
The Patriotic Front is now broadcasting your program.
Kanyara
Interwoven within this radio art piece are moments from an improvised performance, Bread Scores, performed in Weimar, inspired by Jane Ngwenya, a wartime liberation maker, liberation war heroine, and radio maker. The work drew on stories of how small wireless radios were smuggled in loaves of bread to imprisoned fighters. Performers were supplied with graphic, musical, and sound scores. Hidden in bread and asked to improvise. As the struggle and desire for freedom still echoes on the black market, it is a reminder that, like the guerrilla radio system, this market operates illicitly outside formal channels. Amidst its contradictions, the black market in Harare becomes a temporary, semi-liberated zone, a guerrilla space where the ordinary people trade in foreign currency and illegal goods. In this fragile zone, people under economic and political pressure engage in high levels of social, economic improvisation. Here too, there are money changers, peripheralized black bodies, often women, some of them Mapostori, who populate the cracks of a broken economic and religious system to self-craft positions in the post-colonial circus of survival. They travel from the margins of the city, the periphery of the peripheries, to the central business district, renegotiating their place through a politics of sounding. In this sonic performance, I reflect on the guerrilla radio as a chikwambo, a dark contraption of desire, a counterfeit, a parasite born from colonial brutality. I draw a sonic thread from this spectral presence to the black market, another chikwambo in the post-colonial landscape. A political and economic Frankenstein's monster, everywhere and nowhere at once. This shape-shifting goblin haunts Harare streets. One may not see it, but one can hear it. In the hushed murmurs of the greasy US dollar notes, damp with sweat of the money changers, passed between the thumb and the forefinger with the rhythm of desperation. What happens when Zangaradzimu, the wartime radio, gazes into the mirror 4 decades later and sees the black market staring back? Can we listen to this transformation as a continuation of a guerrilla practice, a fukwa, improvised with stealth, moving through time and system? Yet this is also the sound of failure, fracture, the broken promise of liberation. The black market, like a fukwa, returns as a revenant, carrying the same hunger for freedom, once broadcast through guerrilla frequencies.
what some of us are fighting for is to see that this oppressive system is crushed. We don't care whether, I don't even care whether I will be part of the top echelon in the room. I'm not worried, but I'm dying to see a change that, in the system. That's all.
To speak of the black market is to speak of kunamira, to cling, kurembera, to hold on. These words vibrate at the threshold between survival and surrender. They describe a kind of an embodied precarity, hanging onto life by the edge of a trembling rope. Within the sonic field of the black market, kunamira is not merely economic, it is metaphysical. It is the vibration that keeps bodies tethered in chaos, like a hum of an old radio tuned to a fading station. Tina Kamp's notion of the sound inherent to an image or listening to images resonates here. The black market itself is that image, alive with low, continuous frequencies of survival. Dambudzo Marechera might have captured this tone in the House of Hunger, the dirty realism of existing without guarantees. The figure of Chiname, the tout, embodies this precarious state, half-balanced, caught between hustle and fall, the legal and the illegible. His voice is part curse, part prayer, part loudspeaker. He shouts the city into motion. This materialism of struggle manifests in a hybrid sound, an aesthetic, a multi-sensory abduction, as Kodwo Eshun describes. Your fear, flight, thresholds are screaming. It's like your whole body is turned into a giant series of alarm bells. Like your organs want to run away from you. It's like your leg wants to head north. Your arms want to head south, and your feet want to take off somewhere else. It is as if your entire body wants to vacate. You want to go a war from yourself, but you can't. So you stay and enjoy it. Stepping into Harare's Zimex Mall, once the epicenter of the black market trade. The crisp and fricative sounds of money counting, executed with frantic speed, resemble kung fu movie antics. Flipping greasy, grimy notes during a transaction makes one feel like they are part of a heist. These street pals with sonic rituals whisper seductive negotiations, peripheral glances, and constant vigilance. The young money changer's flamboyance communicates both fashion and politics. Tight pants, flat base caps, gold chains, rings, shiny shoes, expensive watches, perfume, both real and fake, saturate the space. African-American rap aesthetics collide with Congolese dandyism, forging new sonic and visual worlds. Image becomes power, style becomes resistance. Perfumes and colognes construct an olfactory hierarchy, allowing one to hear the smell, allowing one to hear wealth through the nose, rituals of desire, fashion divination, dressing according to aspiration, kurova namo nembama, becoming exercises of self-constructions, tattoos, cheap and toxic, bear signs of reappropriation. In these contested spaces, young men weaponize bling, scent and swagger against poverty and historical disenfranchisement. The black market is a theater of endurance, improvisation, and aesthetics. vibrating with a multi-sensorial realism. Each gesture, note, and fragrance carries the weight of struggle, resilience, and a continuing quest for freedom. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Masimba. For those who may not be fully familiar with the black market, especially from countries like Zimbabwe, where we're both from, and in case someone missed it, how would you define the black market?
So a basic definition would be, think of a stock exchange, but on the streets for the ordinary person. Because the inflation rate in Zimbabwe has been so high for many years, people would rather deal with their current dollar, which is our main currency to date. They would rather use the unofficial rate that is found on the streets as opposed to the official rate that you get from the bank. So it creates this big semi-legal market on the streets where everybody is changing money, moving money from place to place. There's also a poetic side to it where the politics of listening are very pronounced in the black market. People hear and sense each other. People sense when the police is about to come. There is something in the atmosphere that tells them to position themselves for those kinds of things. So I'm fascinated by that world, that sonic world, that is the black market. It's also a very contradictory space.
Thank you for that. And as we continue the conversation, you'll see some of Masimba's work in the background. And I think you can already tell from some of the pieces. Well, Masimba, your work is very, it's made out of assemblage. Your sculptural work, I would define it as assemblage. Some of your work, especially your most recent work, includes pieces made out of brass and organic instruments, skate wheels, golf balls, antlers. What is your process and how do you choose objects? And maybe just to add on to that, you mentioned Tina Kampt in your performance lecture. She writes about listening to images. Would you say that you're listening to objects when you create these artworks?
Thank you for the question. I think when Tina Kampt talks about listening to images, she's not talking about the sound that accompanies images, but she speaks of a sound that is inherent in the image itself, which I find very interesting because I'm fascinated with the idea of vibration. That's why I was asking you guys if you can feel the train. So in Zimbabwe culture, sound is, of course, vibration. It is not only what you can hear, the ear is decentered, so to speak. So there is a sort of like a democratized sensory arrangement whereby if your mom wants to ask about the salt in the food, she says, can you hear the salt? You know, so there's a lot of sonic terminology that is used in different places. So to come back to the question, do I listen to images? I think, yes, I do listen to images. I am drawn to what images represent the history of them.
Objects?
Objects, sorry. But also the potential of them to make sound is also very fascinating. So my process is very improvisational. I'm walking into a place with objects and I go to the first thing that pulls me. I don't need to have a reason for that, and I collect it. So this means that I have a lot of objects from way back. Some of them I haven't figured out what to do with them. So it's a collecting practice, but at some point then I find a place for the object. So that is my process. I also think a lot of the relationships between the objects. Some of the objects are very personal. They are very connected to my childhood growing up. Golf balls, skateboard wheels, these are things that have stayed with me for many years in my practice. And they have very interesting personal connections, but they also link to bigger politics of things.
Yeah, can I just ask about the skateboard wheels? Because that's a recurring motif in your work. What's up with that?
So when we grew up in the 90s in Highfields, we used to watch too much television. And I think one of the main characters that was coming through the television must be Donatello from the Ninja Turtles. There's a guy with a skateboard there somewhere. I can't remember the name. So we all fantasized, the idea of having a skateboard. We made our own skateboards back in the day. So it's a childhood fantasy that comes through the work. There's something about mobility too with the skateboard, the idea of the wheel. So the first time I got a chance to be on a skateboard, I was very disappointed because I think my fantasy was stronger than the reality. So I decided that it's better it stays in the work. As a fantasy, there's a little sacred world that it belongs, not in the actual world.
Okay, so something that came up within your performance lecture was Zimex Mall. Why it used to be a mall in Harare, Zimbabwe, a very popular one, and I've noticed that over the years you keep coming back to this site. Why is the site why are you so curious about this site? Can you explain to our audience what Zimex Mall is and why you keep going back?
So in the 90s, the Zimex Mall was the epicenter of the black market. If you wanted to change money, you'd go to the Zimex Mall because the money changers would be standing around. You will know them by their dressing, as I've explained. You can smell them. And also you can hear the bling as they walk. They have a particular aesthetic. So these are the young people who were hanging around the Zimex Mall. There was also a lot of illegal stuff being traded at the Zimex Mall. So the black market doesn't have a physical location, but I think the Zimex Mall is the closest place where you could actually feel and hear what the black market sounds like or smells like. So I usually go back to that place, just reminiscing my experiences and theorizing in that area. Now it's a car park. I think they destroyed it and they built a car park there. Some of the young men still hang around that place, but it's no longer a mall.
And you could say that it's a political site as well.
I think so. I think anything that has to do with everyday survival and finding cracks or gaps in the system becomes political. I think there are also rituals of desire that happen at the black market. It's like you dress according to your next level. So this means that it's okay to spend like $500 on a shoe, because it's sort of like a image or fashion definition. You are putting pressure on the atmosphere to manifest something. So I think that's very political. I find it very fascinating to see these rituals of desire, these fashion divination happening. And I think it's a political thing. It's a people who are saying that we do not want to be where we are. We want to be somewhere else. Whether you agree with it or not, whether you think that it is wasteful, but we want to be somewhere else. So this is what we do with ourselves for us to project ourselves into another place.
Okay, so you've spoken about a lot of things. So you've spoke about the idea of sound and struggle in the city, sound in the urban area, sound and struggle. In the past, you've spoken about the struggle of the flea market, or the market that you can find in many different African urban areas. The struggle associated with taxi, I don't know what, if you're from an African city, I don't know what you call it, matatu, kombi, those public modes of transport. How are these connected? And how does looking and researching this sound then turn into some of the pieces we can see on the screen?
Right. So I think the central aspect in all these is sound, the idea of sound. I've been fascinated of late with sonic methodologies, which are ways of looking at history through sound or listening to history. Most of what we have as our history is something that is maybe based on what we see. But I think there's something to learn by listening. I think there's a lot of information that you can learn in a place, in a city, by just listening to the place. Sometimes when you are living in a place, you take it for granted, but when you get out of a place and then you come back, you listen even more, and you begin to actually realize that the city has a rhythm, and the city has a pulse. And you can analyze that rhythm, and it can tell you things about that city. And also you begin to sense that the city has a kind of a character that it has at different times. You've been to Harare at night, you know that it's super different when in the morning and during the day. So all those rhythms, I think it's very interesting to think through sound and learn about a place through sound. I think the other question had to do with the sculptures. So sculpture, to me, is like a medium in itself and a language that I use to connect to the world. Usually I don't start by sound and then sculpture. Sometimes I start with the sculpture. If you are at the black market or the flea market, there are a lot of contraptions or assemblages that you see around you where people are making ends meet. They build contraptions for their trade. I am fascinated by the eclectic way of putting things together. So my work has always had that assemblage kind of bricolage aesthetic. And of late, I've been activating the work in these kinds of performative rituals and performative activations. So the sculpture becomes almost like a way to understand these ideas of struggle and ideas of the politics of sound and listening.
And maybe just to take it a little bit further, to talk about revolutionary struggle. And to connect it with how, in the past, you've spoken about onomatopoeia, which a lot of Bantu languages have onomatopoeic words, and how is that connected to the idea of struggle and revolution? I'm thinking of toi toi, I guess it's a march or dance, usually associated with gumboots, but we still see it today in protests within Southern Africa. Right. Can you expand on that a bit?
Right, so sound and empire, they work together, they move together. Colonization is a sound, capitalism is a sound. There are a couple of books I can recommend if anybody wants to do further research on that. The role of sound in warfare, the role of sound in colonization, the introduction of brass instruments in warfare by Napoleon in his conquests in Egypt, but also the use of like sonic weapons today, and then propaganda through music. I think we grew up in the era of 100% local in Zimbabwe, where there was very intentional sound that was blasting through the radio 24/7, and it produced a kind of sensitivity in the nation. So sound, I think sound has always been part of politics. So my fascination with the onomatopoeia, which we call nyaudzo singwi, which is a sound that is associated with a word. I found it very fascinating because in Zimbabwe language, we use a lot of onomatopoeia. I think Japanese people also use a lot of onomatopoeia. So this dance, the toi toi, is kind of a ritual, right? It's a marching, it's a military drill, but it's also a protest dance. So when I was researching the history of the toi toi, which I don't have time to go through it, it comes to Zimbabwe through Algeria, North Africa, and it comes via Tanzania through the military training camps of Zipra, and then it goes into Zimbabwe, and then at some point, Mkonto Wesizwe, the Zipra military wing, they encounter the ANC military wing, they encounter Zipra, and they learn the toi toi. And in the 80s and the 90s, during apartheid, the toi toi becomes a South African thing, but this whole history is forgotten. But my fascination with the toi toi was the sound of it. There is a lot of onomatopoeia sound in the dance, and I was wondering why do they use this sound in the chants? And then I was making the connections between the action, how you can simulate an action by sound. And if you look at some of the responses of the apartheid government against the toi toi, it terrorized them. It agitated them because they felt like the sound was actually an object or a shrapnel that was coming towards them. So this kind of thinking is very fascinating in my research in terms of how sound becomes part of these very political and military things.
You've just reminded me about how the vuvuzela has been banned from FIFA. Yeah, and I'm waiting for the works that the ROM has acquired to come so that you can talk about them, but anyway, we'll get there. Then I would love for you to talk to us about Bread Scores, the performance that you're going to do on Saturday, and how that is connected to the Chimurenga War of Independence and the radio being a form of contraband.
So I came across an article that was written by Joyce Ngwenya, who was a Liberation War hero, but also a radio broadcaster during the war. And she spoke of how during the Liberation War, 1964 to 1979, at some point the leaders of the revolution were imprisoned, and the only way to get information to them was to smuggle newspaper cuttings and small radios and batteries in loaves of bread. And then at midnight, when the guards are asleep, they would listen or they would read. I found that very poetic, a small act of resistance, and caring for one another, finding gaps to support each other. So I developed this idea of creating graphic scores and hiding them in loaves of bread, and then get musicians to come and improvise around those scores, just to think and celebrate that idea of radical care, that there are still gaps in which we can take care of one another, even if the system wants to divide and separate the people.
Yeah, that's great. So hopefully everyone can come back on Saturday, 1 p.m. to experience bread scores. And I also love the fact that it's you open it up to the audience, so anyone can become a part of the performance as well. And I think I'm going to open it up for questions, if that's okay. And then maybe later we can talk about the 3 works we've acquired. So yeah, questions, anyone? So Erin, there's a hand. Oh, sorry, I can't see all the way at the back, sorry.
Hello. Thank you for your performance today. My name is Ade, and my question is, can you name one of the books that you said you were going to recommend about music and resistance, or sound and colonization?
Right. So I think what comes top of the list would be Sonic Warfare. I think this is Stephen Goodman. I think it covers everything from the psychology of listening, what he calls earworms, like viral sound that keeps playing in your head, to what he calls muzak, which is music that is used for you to spend more money in shopping malls, that kind of thing, the psychology of that. But you can also look at Moses Curator. He has a book, 2015 book, called Music, Power and Being in Colonial Zimbabwe. I think it's a very seminal text, especially if you are thinking of music and sound from indigenous perspectives. There is also Hungry Listening by Dylan Robinson, which I think is a very powerful text. Talks about First Nations cosmologies and the place of sound in there. Brandon LaBelle has something called Emergent Strategies. It's also about, it's very philosophical text about sound, and another one called Acoustic Territories. There are many of these depending on what your interest is. Some of them are focused really on music, but some of them on the broader idea and the philosophy of sound and listening. Oh, there's also something called The Politics of Listening by Leah Basel. Very interesting text.
There was a question in the front.
Hi, that was amazing. Well, could you describe, if you were part of a larger community of artists working, I don't even know where you live, if Harare perhaps, but is this a larger movement, or are you leading the way, or could you talk a little bit about the community you live and work in?
Thank you. I hope to lead the way at some point. So I live and work in Vienna, but I'm originally from Harare. So in terms of community, it's a small community that is looking at sound from indigenous perspectives from Zimbabwe. Moses Curator, who I've mentioned, is a professor at UC Santa Barbara. Most of his work has to do with radio, the liberation struggle, the place of sound in politics. But there's also an interesting scholar who is a scientist, and he looks at the history of science. Somehow I interpret his work in sonic terms, because he is looking at using indigenous idioms and indigenous ways of thinking to talk about science. And I'm interpreting his work using indigenous ways of knowledge to talk about sound. So he's talking about science, but I'm talking about sound. There's also Tsitsiela Jaji, who writes a lot about sound and modernity and colonial modernity, the role of foreign music, the role of the radio into the African home in the 60s, the 50s and the 60s. So this is kind of like my community, but I also have a community of experimental musicians, people who experiment with sound and play. Some of them play real music, if there's anything like that, but some of them are experimental music people. Yeah.
I also want to add, I think, Masimba, I think some of your contemporaries in terms of contemporary art connected to Africa, I would say people like Emeka Ogbo from Nigeria, Satch Hoyt, Jamaican, German-based artist. There's several sound artists who are exploring sound, who are working today. If I had time, I would name about 10 right off the top of my mind.
But it is a growing, it's a growing field, so to speak. It's not an old field. It's an emergent field.
And maybe just to jump in here and say, like, this afternoon we spent most of the day in the Global Africa collection, and we were supposed to spend 1 hour, and we spent about 3 hours, and you were super excited, and you want to come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I got very excited because I was like, wow, this is a great way of keeping the heritage objects alive and relevant. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, because even for Saturday's performance, it's really important for you to have some of the heritage objects visible for the performance.
Yeah. So I will comment shortly. I think there's a question there that's been...
I'm so sorry, I can't see all the way at the back. Go ahead.
So some of the objects, not only in the museum here at Rome, but all over the world, do not have proper provenance because nobody knows where they came from. So there are gaps in the archive. And I think that's an interesting challenge for artists. Like when you have an object that has a history that nobody knows, how do you engage with that object as an artist? Some of the objects have a violent history, of how their itinerary of coming to this place is a violent history. But some are unknown, nobody knows. So I think in that place, the role of the artist becomes very speculative and becomes almost like a kind of divination or a kind of prognostication where you are trying to find what this object is. And I think that attempt in itself is a very generative process. And I'm thinking like, I think Saidiya Hartman calls it speculative fabulation. Donna Haraway calls it something else, critical fabulation, I think. Like how do you fill the gaps of the archive? It's a very intricate process because we have to ask who has that responsibility. What is the protocol? For instance, if you have a sacred object, who has the right to do that? So those questions to me are very interesting, and I think artists should be engaged with those questions continually.
And questions like who's the source community
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if we need to engage with objects and we need to look for the source community, who is
Right.
the source community on the African continent today?
Right, right. Yeah, I
And-
remember I received some few recordings from, I think they were from Central Africa. They I don't really understand what they are saying, but they sound very sacred. And I was asked to work with them, and I said I cannot do it. You know, maybe the process needs to go back where these came from, and we can have some kind of protocol. I think the idea of looking for a protocol to work with an object itself is a valid response. Just to find a protocol to work with an object, I think it's a response that is valid on its own.
And I just want to say, all artists, local artists, our collections are open. You're welcome to come and spend time in the Global Africa collection. Just give us like a big heads up before you come though, like 3 months. Okay, questions at the back?
Thank you. In one of the images, the performer, I don't know if it was you, but had painted his face. And I was wondering, what does that give you as a performer? Yes, that one.
So that is my friend, Brad Jeff. He's from Leeds. He's an amazing saxophone and wind instrument player. He was born in Leeds, but he has a deep fascination with the Zulu culture. So he has a collection of masks. So I think the idea of painting could be, I'm not sure, but it could be that ritual of getting into a character or a space. Just like sometimes a mask allows you to get into a certain headspace. I think that could be part of it. It could be part of his costume. I didn't get a chance to ask him, but now that you bring it up, I think it's a good opportunity to ask him what it really means for him.
Hello. I'm just going to stand because I'm way back here. I want to thank you both. I came in late because I was circling the building, but it was really good to hear what you had to say and the question and answer. Most of the audience here appears quite young, and I want to just give a quick history about something that you were both talking about. Probably around 30 years ago, we had an exhibition here in the ROM called Into the Heart of Africa. That was really controversial. And it took some 24, maybe 27 years, I think, before an apology was offered to the Black and African communities. I won't take up the time explaining it. The archives are here, actually. Now, coming out of that, after the apology was made, I approached the then curator of the African collection, and she graciously accepted to have us do something very much like what you're talking about. I'm a poet and writer, so we went into the archives, I and some musicians, and we chose objects that spoke to us. Most of us, there was one person whose father was from Ghana and mother from the Bahamas, but most of us were what I call children of the Ma'afa, made the crossing, descendants. And so we chose objects that spoke to us in some way. And I recall Corbiner, he may be I don't know if he's performing on Saturday, wonderful musician at one point. So we would go into the archives and sit with the objects. And we did that for maybe 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes we talked. They allowed us to burn incense sometimes. The rooms have been purpose-built for the indigenous people to smudge, and so we could do that. And then we had a performance in the rotunda, and I'm leaving out a lot of issues around it. But the one thing that I felt that was problematic, the objects were all behind, you know, your the cords that protect them. And so after we did our performance, they were spirited away because there was going to be a reception after and there was going to be food there. So that was something that we were all very concerned about. But I do remember this musician saying at one point, we sat looking at these objects, and he said, you know, we are as lost as those objects are right now. And there were things like you had to wear gloves to touch certain objects, and you would think that in the ordinary course of life before colonialism, these were objects that were part of a household and you would care for them and so on. So it's quite a profound experience, and I hope that that can continue with other artists and so on, but thank you for bringing it up.
Thank you. I can't see properly. Is that Nobesi? Oh, okay, great. Thank you so much for coming. It's an honor to have you here. I read about the performance, and I've spoken to colleagues who told me about that experience. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, I mean, part of what I'm exploring is how to create protocols that make the collection more accessible. So yes, you know, the issue of gloves, you know, some of the chemicals that people used to use in the past to preserve the objects are toxic, so there are arsenics and things like that. We've, you know, been approached by people who want to play some of the instruments, and it's an interesting tension and an interesting balance between accessibility and care. But also I think there's a mammoth, just to be transparent, there's a mammoth task in terms of provenance. And I'm hoping to work with source communities where possible to work with people on the continent, maybe do some exchanges to fill some of those gaps where the object details glorify the collector, usually the military person or the missionary, and there's very little on the maker. So we have a big task ahead of us. But I would love to, as we tackle that challenge here at the ROM, I would love people to still be able to engage and access in a way that's meaningful. There are more questions? Yes. Let's just wait for a mic so that they can hear you on the recording.
I actually had
oh, sorry. We'll come back to you.
A question. First of all, thank you for the display. It was amazing. My question is, as someone from the African diaspora, seeing African objects at the museum always comes with a bittersweet feeling, in the sense that we often see artifacts that were taken from the motherland. So how would you, the both of you, say that one should navigate the difference between seeing it as a promotion of African art and the showcasing of art that was taken?
That's a great question, and that's something I've been asking myself since I started my role here at the ROM. And I think one way is, you know, we shouldn't hide away from the difficult histories. So the fact that it is a colonial collection, or a collection that was amassed because of colonialism, I think inviting contemporary artists to deal with those challenging issues and to find new ways of talking about them in a way that's relevant today is one of many ways. But to also invite people to help us with the research so that we name things, we name objects correctly. So for example, within the collection, I think we have around 80 or 100 mbiras from different parts of the African continent. But on the database, it just says thumb piano. And then you'll see lots of xylophones. I would love to find out what is the Swahili name, what is the Lingala name for specific instruments. So I think it starts with working with people to fill those gaps, and then being able to create juxtapositions with contemporary practices that are relevant to us today. Do you have any comments on that?
Just to back you up, I think also not only contemporary artists, I think communities, as you have said, should be invited. But there are also people who are specifically trained to make some of these things, maybe from generations, or some people who are initiated into making some of these things. Some of the protocol might be deeper than just, doing things formally. It might be a kind of decommissioning or a kind of appeasement. I think it really has to be, there really has to be that political will to engage with the trouble of some of these collections.
Yeah, I love that you said engage with the trouble. I'm definitely not afraid to engage with the trouble.
Okay.
There's several questions. I'm just going to let the team on the ground pass the mic and you just shout your question.
I have one. I just wanted to quickly ask if you could reflect on the embodied elements around your work. You used words like kunamira and kurembera, and there's a lot of touch and sensation involved. So I just wondered if you could reflect more on the intersection of touch and embodiment in your work. Thank you.
All right. Before I respond to you, I just want to respond to the gentleman over there who asked if the music was going to be streamed. I think we have a recording of the performance for sure. I'm not sure how it will be accessible, but I think it can be organized. So, to come to your question, I think when we are thinking of most indigenous knowledge systems, knowledge is an embodied practice. We know from the body. So these words, they are street lingua, right? They are words that are being used on the street right now in Harare, but they are actually very deep philosophically if you want to follow them. Words like chiname, like somebody who sticks or hangs on something, speaks of precarity, but it also speaks of a mysterious ability to survive an ordeal and get an identity out of that. So I think also if we look at language, Zimbabwe language, you can learn a lot about the philosophy of people just from looking at their language and trying to understand how they know from the body and how there's not much distinction between the senses, you know from, it's like a grounded knowledge. You have to be in the place to know. You cannot theorize from a distance. I hope I answered that.
And I think that we'll hold on any further questions, and hopefully our speakers will be able to stay outside for a couple minutes at the end for anybody else who would like to speak to them. Otherwise, come back on Saturday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Tandazani, are you still like to introduce the artwork?
Yes.
I can stop any time that when the artwork's shown up on stage. You can kind of
Maybe I can ask the team at the back to pull up the three. Oh, there we go. Yeah, these ones.
Tandazani has a surprise for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so these are part of Masimba's Dhlakama series, and I don't know if you want to just quickly talk about them. Oh, okay. Well, just to say we're very happy to have these works become part of the ROM collection. Thank you.
And they are on the way to the ROM right now. So we tried very hard to try to bring them on time for this symposium so everyone have a look at it. But there is some regulations on the CITES, shippings, transportations, so it's on the way. So, well, that's a good time to ask you coming back again. So thank you very much for our today's guest on Masimba Hwati, and you really brought me back to my memories in the 1980s on the black market. So I was a kid when I hang out in the black market, that I was acquired a $250 US that allowed me to come to the Oklahoma as an international student before I collected my scholarship. So that's black market. And that is fascinating dynamic presentation about how I can redefine the black market that you might use. And thank you, Tandazani, for your guidance, conversations, and now we all understand how we're looking forward to the transformational work that you are planning here at the museum and engaging the trouble. I heard that. And well, she and I could not do that transformational work without you, our wonderful audience today. And I'm very touched to hear your questions, your observations, your experience with RAM, that I have been around for close to 30 years, 28 years to be exactly. So I understand how much work have to be done that we come so late for 28 years. Apology for the Africa community. I still feel sorry, and even though I have done some things behind the scene, working with our former curator of African Dr. Sylvia Forney, and what I feel, and from my field of collection, background of China, Asia, and I do have my community members come in tears to see the treasures and the objects and the heritage that are taken away from the homeland. I heard you. And what I want to say over the time that I've been in the museum, this is the time that I have very rarely that we have an open forum and we can talk about these troubles. And that is a difference we're making, and we want to continue to make that. So thank you very much. I just want to say that's from my heart, and I'm so glad you're here, and I want you to come back. So hope you have the enjoying tonight, and have a great night. I'll see you next time.